Hey guys, tonight we're diving into two equally absurd worlds. The frostbitten hay-scratch life of medieval peasants, and the totally overhyped drama of ancient Greek mythology. Imagine trudging through knee-deep snow to sleep next to a goat while Zeus gets busy flinging lightning bolts from a heated cloud palace. Sounds unfair? It is. You tuck yourself into a lumpy straw mattress, one sheep short of actual insulation, while gods in marble perfection lounge on Mount Olympus complaining about ambrosia being a little stale. You'd trade a lifetime of their divine squabbling for a pair of dry socks and a non-splintery outhouse seat. And that's where we begin, with cold fingers, colder stories, and the utterly unhelpful nature of mythology when the wind howls through your thatched ceiling. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And hey, let me know in the comments where you're listening from and what time it is right now. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. The gods of Olympus are busy doing, well, not much. You, meanwhile, are trying to survive a night where even the rats are shivering. The winter wind whistles through the wooden slats of your tiny home like an angry satyr with a flute. Outside, wolves howl. Inside, your breath fogs the air like you're halfway up a mountain. Except you're not. You're just trying to stay alive one night at a time. Now, the Greeks had their own myths about winter, mostly involving Demeter and her daughter Persephone being dragged to the underworld. That story? Supposed to explain the seasons. Persephone's gone, the earth gets cold and dead. She comes back, spring blooms. Cute idea, but doesn't help you much when your firewood is wet and your nose feels like it's been carved from ice. Still, Demeter's grief was nothing compared to the dread you feel when the fire sputters. In medieval homes, if you could call them that, heating was an act of desperate improvisation. No fireplaces in every room. No insulation. No thermostat to argue with. Just a central hearth, if you were lucky, where people gathered like moths clinging to the one source of warmth and cooked, gossiped, and slowly roasted only their front halves. The back half? Cold as a drachma in Hades. Meanwhile, in the Greek tales, there's always a glowing hearth, a cozy palace, a warm golden glow spilling from some godly banquet. Hera lounges. Apollo plays a lyre. Hermes runs around in winged sandals. No one's worried about chilblains or what to do when the cow collapses and your main heat source is now dinner. You, on the other hand, sleep fully clothed. You don't undress. That's hilarious. You tie your outer coat around your knees and wedge your feet between a sibling's ribcage and a lukewarm chicken, hoping no one rolls over and smothers the candle stub. If you're in a wealthier village, maybe there's a hay-lined wall and a draft-free corner. But let's be honest, you're not in a wealthy village. You're in reality. And reality doesn't come with fleece-lined anything. Now imagine telling your kids a Greek myth to distract them. You whisper, so there was this hero named Theseus. And right as you get to the Minotaur, someone coughs so hard their blanket catches a spark and you're all suddenly doing the medieval fire drill. Smother with straw, yell for the neighbor, maybe cry a little. It's chaos, but hey, the Minotaur's still in the labyrinth, waiting. Historians still argue whether families actually slept with animals to stay warm or if that's just a cliché. But go ahead, ask anyone who's lived in a drafty cottage with no chimney. If the pig radiates heat, the pig becomes your pillow. Period. Meanwhile, your Greek myth is back. So Theseus kills the Minotaur, you whisper, tucking your half-charred blanket under your armpit, and escapes with help from a magical string. Nice, right? Except in your world, string's a luxury you use once before readying the chicken coop. The Greek world is full of noble sacrifices, clever gods, and metaphorical winters. Your world is just full of actual ones. Now, let's talk smells. The Greek gods are always perfumed with nectar or surrounded by incense. Your version of incense? A mix of damp hay, unwashed tunics, and whatever that goat just did in the corner. Forget ambrosia, you'd take bread that isn't half moldy. Food in winter? That's the real epic. Drying apples, salting meat, praying no one steals your last root vegetable. You don't get a chorus of muses to sing your struggle. Just the occasional rat skittering through your pantry with zero respect. Still, there's something sturdy about you. Something a Greek god wouldn't last a single sleet-streaked hour with. Dionysus might throw a party, but he's crying the second he has to chop frozen wood with a cracked axe head. Athena might be wise, but she's never had to rig a windbreak out of rotting thatch and sheep dung. You're a survivor, and that makes the myths feel quaint, entertaining, sure, but disconnected, like bedtime stories for someone who doesn't need to sleep in boots. You might whisper the tale of Icarus, the boy who flew too close to the sun, but your main takeaway: man should have flown closer to the fireplace. There's a comfort in storytelling, though. Even when the stories don't help. Even when they feature gods too busy turning into swans to lend a hand. You pass the time with tales because time needs help passing when the wind shrieks through the keyhole and your hands are too cold to knit. And sometimes, just sometimes, that story keeps the fear away long enough to drift off. Even if you wake up with a straw imprint on your cheek and a chicken pecking your hair. The Greek gods wrap themselves in embroidered robes of gold-threaded silk. You, on the other hand, are experimenting with layering techniques that include sackcloth, second-hand wool, and a burlap curtain you tore down last spring. Somewhere, Athena is judging your fashion sense, but you don't care. You're not dressing to impress, you're dressing to survive. Blankets? If you have one, it's probably a hand-me-down from 3 generations ago, scratchier than hay and full of suspicious holes. More likely, you're piling on layers of whatever's available. Old cloaks, a crusty leather apron, maybe the pelt of something you were once emotionally attached to. When the air in your bedroom is colder than your pantry, you learn fast how to wrap yourself like a medieval cabbage roll. Now flip that image over to Mount Olympus, where gods bask in a kind of perpetual Mediterranean spring. The hearths there glow for ambiance, not survival. Apollo doesn't even break a sweat when strumming his lyre. But you're over here considering whether it's worth it to pee tonight or hold it till sunrise, because stepping outside might turn your toes into frozen beans. Let's talk bedding, if you can call it that. A medieval mattress is basically a canvas sack filled with straw, feathers if you're lucky, or moss if you're not. The straw pokes through, it crunches every time you shift. And don't even think about fluffing it, unless your idea of fluffing is whacking it with a stick until fewer bugs crawl out. But the Olympians? Their beds float on clouds or glimmer with ivory and gold. Even minor gods sleep in luxury, probably under silken sheets spun by nymphs whispering lullabies. Meanwhile, your lullaby is the wind rattling loose boards and the distant scream of what might be a fox. Or possibly just your neighbor arguing with their goat again. And yet, you adjust. You become inventive. A worn shirt becomes a hat. A clump of sheep's wool gets tied around your feet with twine like a pair of prehistoric slippers. If you're really desperate, and you usually are, you warm a stone by the fire and tuck it into your bedding, hoping it radiates just enough heat to convince your body not to die tonight. Historians still argue whether peasants really used heated bricks or stones in bed, or if that's just a romanticized version of desperation. But heated anything beats the alternative, waking up with icicles forming on your eyebrows. In Greek myths, characters like Odysseus sail across seas, seduce witches, and get cursed by vengeful sea gods, all without once complaining about sleeping arrangements. You'd like to see how he'd fare in your world, where the sails are patched bed linens and the biggest journey is to the communal bread oven 2 villages over. Speaking of that oven, it's more than just a place for baking. In many medieval communities, people gathered near the village bakehouse not just for food, but for warmth. Imagine bundling yourself and your half-frozen kids into that space, sharing body heat with strangers and arguing about whose turn it is to sit closest to the smoldering coals. Greek gods have symposiums. You have community bakehouse elbow fights. The concept of personal space in winter? Gone. Entire families, sometimes 2 or 3, share the same room. You sleep head to foot to conserve heat and try not to think too hard about whose breath is on your feet. Even the family pig gets a spot near the hearth. You joke that it snores louder than Uncle Bartolomeo, but secretly you're glad it's there. Warmth is warmth, and at least pigs don't get up to pee. Now, over in the myths, you've got people transforming into animals and back without so much as a sniffle. Zeus turns into a swan, a bull, even a shower of gold. But you're just trying to transform your frozen legs into something that feels again before the rooster crows. And showers? Don't even start. You haven't bathed in weeks. No one has. Bathing in winter is like volunteering to die. The water's freezing, the firewood's too valuable for heating water, and the act of undressing feels criminal. The gods might have spring-fed spas. You're washing your hands with leftover porridge water and calling it hygiene. By the way, if you're lucky enough to have a fur, it's probably crawling. Mites, fleas, lice. They're part of the nightly ritual. The Greek gods have gold crowns. You have straw in your hair and something suspicious living in your scarf. But hey, at least the lice keep you company, right? Now, let's not forget the window. That charming hole in the wall with animal hide or, if you're rich, a scrap of translucent horn. Glass is a myth. Just like the one where Eros makes people fall in love at first sight. You'd fall in love with insulation at first sight, given the chance. And still, you make it work. You patch the holes. You stuff the cracks. You press your body to your sleeping neighbor and pray they don't snore like a dying donkey. Sleep comes eventually, not because it's peaceful, but because exhaustion always wins. There's a kind of grit in this nightly ritual that even Hercules would admire. Sure, he strangled a lion, but has he ever tried to fall asleep while listening to the roof creak and imagining what kind of ice demon is clawing at the shutters? Didn't think so. The gods are eternal, but you, wrapped in rags and courage, are enduring. There's a difference. They float above the world, untouched by hardship. You live in it, breathe it, survive it. And as you pull the stiff wool tighter over your shoulders and tuck your hands under your armpits for warmth, you whisper another tale, maybe about Hera's jealousy or Hermes' tricks, and drift off into a dream where the straw doesn't poke and the wind doesn't bite. Prometheus steals fire for humanity, heroic, dramatic, the very spark of civilization. And what do we do with that sacred gift? Mostly burn our fingers trying to keep a damp log pile from smoking out the room. You mutter thanks to Prometheus under your breath as you nurse yet another splinter and poke at a stubborn coal. The myth says he suffered eternal torment for this. You suffer nightly inconvenience, which sometimes feels like the same thing. Your fire doesn't roar, it sulks. It snaps at you when you feed it too fast and pouts when you try to coax it gently. Sometimes it flares up just long enough to give you hope, then fades to ash like a Greek tragedy in miniature. But you keep trying, because this fickle little flame is the difference between frostbitten sleep and mere discomfort. The ancient Greeks saw fire as a symbol of divine knowledge, a link between gods and mortals. You see it as a blackened pot dangling above a sputtering flame, hopefully hot enough to thaw the soup and not just fill the house with smoke. Smoke, by the way, doesn't exit through a chimney. That's a luxury. It escapes however it pleases. Gaps in the wall, holes in the roof, or straight into your face. And yes, medieval homes had central hearths, but no chimneys for much of the early Middle Ages. Historians still argue whether chimneyless design was deliberate or just one of many unfortunate architectural oversights. Either way, your lungs don't care. You've coughed enough soot to rival Hephaestus himself. Fire's other downside? It's unpredictable. One moment, your house is cold. The next, it's on fire. That happened, a lot. Especially when thatch roofs, loose kindling, and wool garments collided with open flames. You don't light a fire in winter. You negotiate with it. You monitor it. You pray over it, sometimes literally, because if it goes out during the night, you're not getting it back until the morning. And that means waking up colder than your relationship with your neighbor who borrowed your dry wood last week. Over on Mount Olympus, fire is ambiance. A background glow while gods sip wine and pass judgment. Hephaestus might tinker in his forge, but he never has to choose between using firewood to cook or heat the room. You do, and sometimes that means cold stew, because your fingers have stopped bending and someone still needs to dry their boots. And speaking of firewood, oh, the daily odyssey. You venture out with numb fingers and a basket that used to hold turnips, hoping to find something dry enough to burn and not just hiss at you in betrayal. Fallen branches are ideal, but those go fast. You consider scavenging fence posts. The temptation is real. The fence hasn't been holding much in, anyway. Fuel sources vary, and not always pleasantly. Animal dung? Check. Peat if you're lucky. Dried up roots, pine cones, even twisted straw ropes dipped in fat. Anything that burns gets a promotion to heating solution. You feel like a magician turning garbage into heat, except the magic smells bad and still barely works. The Greek gods never scramble for firewood. Prometheus may have brought them the fire, but no one ever talks about who brings the kindling. Some nights, when the wind rattles the shutters and the fire dies despite all your efforts, you just give up. You curl into yourself like a cinnamon bun made of wool and regret. You think about Prometheus, chained to a rock with an eagle gnawing at his liver, and weirdly, you relate. Maybe not to the eagle part, but the eternal punishment for doing something helpful? Yeah, that lands. The Greeks said fire was a divine gift, and maybe it is. But they never warned you it would come with so many chores. You have to tend it constantly, feed it, shield it from drafts. It's more needy than a newborn goat. And it doesn't thank you. It just burns things and disappears when you blink too slowly. There's a story in Hesiod's Theogony where after Prometheus gave fire to man, Zeus punished humanity with Pandora. Yes, that Pandora, whose jar, later a box, let out all the world's troubles. It's a cute myth, but you know what lets out real trouble? An unsupervised ember rolling across your straw floor. Suddenly you're not worrying about abstract evils loosed upon the earth. You're worrying about how fast you can grab the baby and the butter churn before the roof comes down in flames. Fringe records even describe fire rituals that doubled as social insurance. In some villages, families with no fire would beg for a lucky coal from neighbors, usually gifted with a bit of ceremony, and sometimes a side eye. Taking fire without permission? Major faux pas. The hearth, after all, was sacred. A lot like Hestia, the Greek goddess of the hearth, who got booted from Olympus's main stories for being too boring. And maybe she was boring. No love affairs, no wars, no swans. Just fire, warmth, and quiet company. But in your world, that's not boring, it's survival. You'd happily trade all the drama of Zeus's love life for 5 uninterrupted hours near a well-fed hearth. In fact, you might even pray to Hestia sometimes. Not formally, but in those whispered midnight moments where your fire flickers low and your breath puffs out like smoke signals. Just stay alive, till morning, you mutter. Please, just one more night. And most of the time, it does. Not thanks to Prometheus, not because of divine intervention, but because of you, your stubbornness, your care, your ability to fall asleep with one eye open, ready to leap out of bed the moment the scent of smoke changes tone. As the fire softens to a glow and your eyelids finally surrender, you think one more absurd thought. If Greek myths were real, you'd be the hero. You, with your soot-streaked face, singed sleeves, and one half-dead log smoldering in the grate. Take that, Olympus. You hear the wind before you even open your eyes. It moans like a banshee, long, low, and entirely uninterested in your comfort. A thin beam of early morning light slices through the cracks in your roof, and you already know the fire went out hours ago. Again, you huddle deeper under your layers, wishing, just once, that Zeus and his famous thunderbolts might stop posturing and do something useful. Like fix the hole above your bed. The myths say Zeus rules the skies. Clouds, storms, lightning, all his domain. But not once does he send a gentle, warming breeze into your miserable hut. He's far too busy chasing nymphs and turning into weird animals to care that your thatch is soaked and your mattress smells like wet dog. And about that roof, have you seen it? You probably helped thatch it yourself. It's a lumpy, sagging patchwork of reeds, moss, mud, and prayer. If the wind shifts the wrong way, a section might just fly off like a startled bird. And there you'll be, holding a bucket under the open sky, muttering curses that predate Latin. Contrast that with the Greeks' lofty temples and divine halls. The gods live in polished marble, beneath ceilings so high they echo. Not a single roof leak among them. You don't see Poseidon laying down planks or Hermes fixing a rafter. Their world is a sanitized stage, untouched by rot or mildew. Yours? A symphony of creaks, drips, and shivering chickens. Historians still argue whether peasants layered turf and clay atop their roofs for extra insulation, or whether that was mostly a regional hack. Either way, you've tried it. It works, sort of. Until the snow melts and turns your ceiling into an accidental indoor swamp. You don't even flinch when a drip lands on your forehead anymore. It's become part of your bedtime routine. You try plugging holes with rags. You jam old socks into gaps. At one point, you even attempted to paste straw together with animal fat. That went as well as expected, until a hungry dog tried to eat your roof. Modern problems require medieval solutions, and sometimes those solutions involve weeping quietly into your bonnet. Meanwhile, in the myths, rain is always symbolic. It brings fertility, renewal, divine justice. In your world, it brings soggy shoes and cold stew. You can't even light a fire properly because the dampness has settled into everything. Your matches? Non-existent. You're down to flint and furious optimism. Some days you wonder if Zeus is personally targeting your chimneyless hut. And honestly, it feels personal. In Greek epics, storms signal the wrath of gods. In your house, they signal the wrath of mold. You've seen mushrooms sprout indoors. That's not poetic, it's concerning. The only thunder you fear is the sound of a support beam groaning under another night of sleet. Let's say you're lucky and have some tiles or wooden shingles. Doesn't help much. They're cracked, warped, and probably held in place with nothing more than wishful thinking and sheep dung mortar. It's the kind of architectural marvel that makes you look up and say, if you fall tonight, please aim for the chamber pot and not my face. And still, life carries on. You patch, you shift your bed, you angle buckets strategically. You teach the kids to sleep facing away from the wall that leaks the most. Maybe you rotate who gets the driest spot each night. It's a silent dance, passed down through generations, and no one gets a trophy. The Greeks, meanwhile, had oaths and rituals invoking the sky gods. You mutter a practical prayer, just don't collapse tonight. The sound of wind rattling a loose roof tile becomes a kind of lullaby. You convince yourself it's soothing, until it actually falls, and you're chasing it across the yard in your underthings, dodging puddles and chickens. Let's talk tools. Got a hammer? Didn't think so. You make do with rocks, borrowed axes, and whatever happens to be lying around. Fixing a roof in winter isn't craftsmanship. It's survival art. Every solution is temporary. Every repair is a compromise between what's broken and what you can afford to live with. Meanwhile, Hephaestus, god of smiths, builds automatons and golden thrones that walk. You'd settle for a ladder that doesn't splinter when you look at it. The Greek gods have precision tools forged in celestial fire. You have a sharp stick and an old comb you're using as a nail puller. And yet, there's humor in it. You and your neighbor swap stories. My roof collapsed on the pig again. I caught rain in my soup. Saved me a trip to the well. You laugh because you have to. If the roof falls, you want it to land gently on a punchline, not your spirit. Fringe folklore even suggests some villagers believed roof leaks meant the house had grown tired and needed a blessing, or a small offering to the local spirits. Whether or not you believe that, you've probably muttered apologies to your beams after stomping too hard or throwing a tantrum about the draft. You respect the roof. You fear it. You pretend you're in charge. Even if you sometimes get dripped on mid-snore. And when the stars are out and the wind has calmed and your patchy little hut settles into a creaky stillness, you allow yourself a rare, fragile thought. It's not beautiful, this place. It's not majestic or myth-worthy. But it holds you. Most of the time, it's yours. And until Zeus decides to start a divine roof repair side hustle, it'll have to do. So you curl tighter, shift your straw to the dry side, and drift off to a dream where your house is warm, your ceiling doesn't leak, and no god is throwing a tantrum overhead. In the myths, the satyrs never sleep. They dance, they drink, they chase nymphs around forests lit by eternal twilight. You, meanwhile, are curled beneath 3 layers of itchy wool, your feet pressed to the side of a very judgmental chicken. It squawks softly in its sleep, offended that your toes are near its wing. but also too cold to do anything about it. You reach for warmth wherever you can, and tonight, that happens to be poultry-based. The contrast is ridiculous. Satyrs sip wine from golden goblets, and you sip thin onion broth from a cracked mug that used to be half of something fancier. Their nights are endless parties under starlit skies. Yours are silent save for the occasional cough, the muffled rustle of someone adjusting their feet, and the soft groan of your joints remembering what cold truly feels like. You used to think sleeping with animals sounded funny, rustic, quaint. That was before you learned what it's really like. Feathers in your mouth, the odd midnight hoof in your ribs, and a smell that would knock Dionysus sober. But when the temperature dips low enough to make your fingernails ache, the goat becomes your best friend. The pig, your space heater, and the cat, a heated blanket that occasionally bites. Historians still argue whether this close animal sleeping was necessity or exaggeration. Some believe it was common only in the harshest regions. But you've lived through enough winters to know, necessity makes a lot of strange things normal. The choice isn't, share your bed with livestock, or, sleep in peace. It's, livestock, or, hypothermia. Easy decision. And it wasn't just for heat. Animals offered a bit of security. That pig might grumble, but it'd grunt loud enough if something came snooping in the night. Plus, they didn't judge your snoring. Not as much as your cousin Aldrich, who's on the other side of the room muttering about your hay squeak shifting. Over in Olympus, things are different. Creatures exist for show, centaurs, nymphs, fauns, but none of them are practical. None of them warm your bed or remind you to seal the barn door. Even Cerberus, the great three-headed dog, guards the underworld like a security system. You'd prefer a three-headed mutt that could cuddle and keep your ankles from freezing. But, alas, no one in myth designed gods with peasant comfort in mind. Imagine a satyr visiting your hut. He'd take one look at your sleep setup, siblings in a row, hens at your feet, mother snoring against the hearth, and bolt back into the woods, wine jug bouncing against his furry hip. He wouldn't last one night without silk cushions and flute music. You lie there, listening to the faint rustle of straw as the rooster stirs early, again. You debate whether it's worth tossing a pebble to get him to hush. But that risks waking up the baby. And then it's over. No sleep for anyone. You stay still, quiet. The chicken under your blanket lets out a suspicious cluck, as if reminding you whose side of the bed it is. In the dark, your thoughts wander. You remember the story of Pan, the goat-legged god of the wild. Not technically a satyr, but close enough. He plays music that entrances, they say. His pipes summon flocks, seduce maidens, and terrify enemies. You wonder if they'd summon heat. You'd trade your left boot for one tune that warmed the room for more than a heartbeat. There's a part of you that laughs at all this. Not a loud laugh, just the quiet, resigned kind that bubbles up when you realize you've normalized things most people would cry about. Like using a sheep's belly as a pillow, or braiding your own hair with your sisters so you don't separate in the night. That's not myth. That's just winter. And yet, despite the discomfort, there's a strange comfort in this closeness. No one is alone. Not really. You can feel the warmth of your family, your animals, your home, even if it leaks and creaks and smells like old cabbage. You've heard tales of warriors who die in cold mountain passes, kings who freeze in lonely castles. They had more space, sure, but they didn't have this. The tangled mess of survival bodies. The low-breathing rhythm of everyone just barely making it through the night together. Fringe customs even include blessing the animals before sleep, thanking them for their warmth. You've whispered a "thank you" to the cow once or twice. Mostly when she didn't kick in her sleep. It's a mutual understanding. I'll let you stay if you let me live. You once dreamed of Pegasus, a magnificent winged horse soaring over frost-covered hills. In that dream, he landed outside your hut and said, "Come with me." But when you climbed on, he smelled like your real mule and tripped on the woodpile. You woke up tangled in your own blanket, half frozen and oddly grateful for how grounded your world really is. Because yes, the myths are beautiful. They sparkle, but they also float, untethered from the dirt and straw and frostbitten toes you know so well. They don't teach you how to survive with nothing but stubbornness and a patchy pig blanket. So, as your eyes begin to flutter and the barn owl calls in the distance, you squeeze your eyes shut tighter. Maybe tonight, you'll dream of satyrs again, but this time, they're crowding into your hut, begging for a corner of your blanket, whining about the smell. And you'll smile, just a little, and say, "Squeeze in, boys." We all freeze or none of us do. And then, finally, you'll sleep. Aphrodite, the Greek goddess of beauty and love, emerges from sea foam with perfect skin, flowing hair, and a permanent glow. You, by contrast, just emerged from your bedroll with hay stuck to your chin, a patchy rash from mystery wool, and fingers so cold they could double as icicles in a nativity play. Your beauty routine involves not getting frostbite on your nose before breakfast. In the cold of winter, vanity becomes a luxury no one can afford. You glance at the bucket of water in the corner, it's frozen solid. Again, the mirror, if you even have one, is probably too fogged over to see yourself anyway. And honestly, that might be a blessing. Whatever Aphrodite's doing to keep her complexion radiant, it definitely doesn't involve washing with melted snow and wiping with the corner of a soot-dusted apron. Still, you try. Maybe you rub a bit of lard onto your cheeks to keep the wind from cracking them open like overbaked bread. Goose fat, if you're fancy. Bear grease if you're very lucky, or very remote. It stinks, sure, but it locks in moisture, and possibly some regrets. Historians still argue whether medieval folk actually used animal fat as skincare or if that's just an exaggerated folk belief. But plenty of household manuals mention salves and balms made from tallow, herbs, and oils, most of which you'd rather eat than smear on your face. Except rosemary. You'll smear rosemary on anything. The thing is, winter doesn't care about beauty. You could be Helen of Troy and still get cracked lips, windburn, and fingernails that feel like they're trying to retreat into your palms. And romance? Please. There is nothing romantic about trying to hold hands when both of you are wearing mittens, 3 sleeves, and layers of crusty underclothes that haven't seen soap since Michaelmas. Aphrodite has swans and roses and scented baths. You have cracked wooden tubs, boiling kettles, and a race against time before the hot water cools into disappointment. A full bath might happen once a month. Maybe. And even then, you go last, after your siblings and uncle and that one mysterious family friend who never seems to leave. By the time it's your turn, the water is half soup, half shame. And yet, you still care, just a little. You pluck the straw from your hair. You smooth your apron. You dab your neck with lavender if someone traded you some last summer. And you laugh quietly, because what is beauty in a world where socks are mismatched and your only flirtation today was locking eyes with someone while both of you fought over the same log near the fire? Meanwhile, the myths talk about divine allure. Aphrodite simply is beauty. She doesn't try, she doesn't primp. She walks into a room and kings forget their names. You walk into a room and someone asks if you've checked your boots for mice yet. There's a dignity in that, though. You earn your presence. You arrive not on a clamshell, but with calloused hands, wind-chapped cheeks, and the determination of someone who's survived 3 consecutive frozen breakfasts. Sometimes, you think about those love stories, Paris and Helen, Orpheus and Eurydice, and you wonder how they'd go in your world. Paris would take one look at your drafty hut and say, "Actually, I'm good." Eurydice would probably trip over the chamber pot in the dark, and Orpheus would never find her again, especially if she wandered into the neighbor's barn instead of the underworld. Fringe tales even suggest that some peasants crafted love charms out of herbs and boiled roots in winter, part potion, part placebo, and entirely desperate. You tried once. You steeped a bit of mint, thyme, and onion peel in warm ale and hoped for a miracle. All it did was make you burp in front of the baker's son, who still won't make eye contact. But love does happen, slowly, quietly, in shared bread, in laughter by the fire, in the moment someone lets you have the slightly less moldy half of the turnip. No swans, no rose petals, just warmth, kindness, and maybe, if the gods are generous, a bit of privacy behind the grain sacks. There's a part of you that pities the Olympians. They don't know what it's like to fall in love with someone because of how they chop wood or fix a hole in the roof with only a spoon and a dream. They don't see each other at their worst, bundled in layers, face red from cold, hair uncombed and eyes bleary. They don't understand how intimacy comes not from perfection, but from persistence. Aphrodite would hate this world. Too drafty, too damp, too real, but you've made peace with it. Your beauty isn't the kind that causes wars. It's the kind that survives winters. And so, tonight, as you rub a little leftover grease onto your cracking hands and pull your scarf higher to protect your chin, you smile to yourself. You are not a goddess. You are not ageless, or flawless, or surrounded by perfumed doves. You are human, you are warm, and somehow, despite it all, still kind of beautiful. Delphi, the ancient sanctuary where the oracle sat cloaked in vapor and riddles, offered answers to kings, generals, and heroes. You don't need riddles. You need firewood that isn't soaked and maybe some advice on how to patch your wall with nothing but bread dough and desperation. But when you ask the heavens for wisdom, the sky just spits sleet. You imagine, for a second, climbing Mount Parnassus and kneeling before the oracle. "O great Pythia," you say, "how do I stop the wind from coming in through the floorboards?" She stares, breathes in some mysterious vapors, and whispers, "Move your bed." Unhelpful, but thanks, I guess. Greek myths are full of these mystical sources of knowledge. Sacred springs, whispering stones, gods who dream the future. Your world is full of slightly suspicious neighbors who give advice like, rub garlic on your feet, and bury a potato under the hearth to keep the devil out. One of those might actually work, but you forgot which. What you really need isn't prophecy. It's insulation. That's the thing no one in Olympus seems to understand. They talk about fate and glory, but not a single god has ever told anyone how to keep a hovel warm when the wind blows sideways and the door doesn't fully close. You try stuffing rags in the cracks, but the rats just think it's nesting material. Your best tool? Mud. Lots of it. Slap it on the walls, the floor, your knees if you have to. Anything to block the cold. Historians still argue whether medieval villagers intentionally constructed double walls for warmth or if the practice came about through generations of trial and muddy error. Either way, you've definitely built something questionable using branches, straw, and 2 sad buckets of clay, and it's mostly still standing. There's no divine vision guiding you. No sacred scroll buried in a cave to reveal the secrets of heating efficiency. You have instinct, tradition, and your grandmother's muttered spells, which mostly involve spitting in the corners and cursing the wind by name. The myths talk of destiny. You're more concerned with whether your feet are going to fall off before Lent. There's something comforting in that, weirdly. You're not beholden to prophecy. You're beholden to practicality. Let's be honest, if you did receive a prophecy, it'd probably sound like this. Thy toes shall blacken unless thou stuffest thine shoes with straw. Which you've already done, twice. And you're considering stealing the neighbor's goose feathers because straw just isn't cutting it anymore. Sometimes, when you're sitting by the dying fire, you close your eyes and pretend to ask the oracle something meaningful. Will the harvest be good this year? And then you answer yourself, no, because the mice ate half the seed grain, and your cousin traded the other half for a pie. Wisdom. Delphi had a reputation. Pilgrims traveled hundreds of miles to ask life-changing questions. You walk 6 feet to ask your uncle if the soup's ready. His answer is usually, no, followed by, go find more wood. So you do. And that's where the real oracles are, in the woodpile, the smoke, the frost patterns on the window. You read the signs not in sacred symbols but in everyday struggle. Is the frost on the inside of the wall? Trouble. Is the chicken standing on one leg for warmth? Colder than usual. Did the dog refuse to go outside this morning? Prepare for snow. There's one fringe tale passed around in whispers. That sometimes, if the fire crackles a certain way, it means the weather will turn. You've stared at your hearth long enough to start believing it. When it sputters, bad luck. When it pops, someone's talking about you. When it hisses like a snake, that's just the wet log you threw in, but you shiver anyway. Prophecy is a luxury. You live in the present. You can't afford long-term predictions when every day is a battle to keep your fingers working and your nose from turning purple. You don't need riddles or incense. You need socks that don't smell like despair. You think about the oracle sometimes, wrapped in her linen veil, inhaling sacred fumes, muttering cryptic truths. You envy her warmth. Her temple probably had thick stone walls and a roof that didn't leak. People brought her gifts, wine, bread, fine fabrics. You'd settle for someone bringing you dry kindling without being asked. And yet, for all their wisdom, oracles never had to scrub soot off walls or scrape ice from a bucket just to brush their teeth. You've learned things no sacred flame ever revealed. How to warm stones under your skirt. How to stack sleeping bodies like firewood for maximum efficiency. How to tell if your soup's ready by the smell of singed onion. These lessons are quiet. They aren't sung by bards or etched into tablets. But they keep you alive. So tonight, as the wind growls through the trees and your single candle flickers in protest, you wrap yourself tighter in your patched cloak and whisper your own oracle's truth. If it drips on your head, move the bed. You smile in the dark, because you don't need Olympus. You've got wisdom of your own. In Homer's world, heroes feast every night, roasted oxen, honeyed wine, golden cups brimming with luxury. You're gnawing a hunk of turnip that tastes vaguely of dirt and regret. The wine? Non-existent. The golden cups? You're sipping thin broth from a bowl so cracked it whistles when you breathe too hard. Winter eating isn't glamorous. It's practical, repetitive, and occasionally terrifying. You've got a few onions hanging from the rafters, shriveled like forgotten curses. A jar of questionable lard. Some dried peas. A loaf of bread so dense it could be used as a weapon. And in the corner, under a cloth, something fermenting. You're not sure what. You're not sure you want to know. And still, this is precious. These scraps mean survival. You remember stories of the Greek hero Achilles sulking in his tent because someone took his prize girl. You wonder how he'd sulk after 3 weeks of cabbage soup and no salt. Would he still be the greatest warrior of his generation? Or would he be sobbing quietly into a frostbitten carrot like the rest of us? Historians still argue whether medieval peasants truly starved during every winter or whether community food sharing softened the blow. The truth probably sits in the middle. Yes, the food was boring and scarce, but neighbors helped. Sometimes, unless they were also starving. Then it was more of a polite competition over who could pretend they weren't. You learn to stretch things. A single ham bone becomes the base for 6 stews. You thicken watery soup with old bread. You add herbs when you can, though most have dried up or frozen. Salt, if you have it, is hoarded like treasure. You dream of meat the way Odysseus dreamt of Ithaca, wistfully, with a hint of despair. The gods, of course, never went hungry. Dionysus flows with wine. Demeter commands the harvest. Even Hades throws parties with endless platters. But you scrape the bottom of the pot, praying the charred layer counts as flavor. Some days, you chew just to remind yourself your jaw still works. Fringe recipes survive in scraps of lore. Pine needle broth for vitamin C, boiled bark for cleansing, bread made from acorns when grain ran out. You've tried 2 out of 3. You don't recommend the bark. Your daily menu is not diverse. It's not romantic. It's solid. You know what to expect. Turnip, cabbage, pea mush, more turnip. Maybe a fish if the river wasn't frozen. Maybe something pickled. And always bread, dark, heavy, barely risen. The kind of bread that says, you will live, but you will not enjoy it. Once a week, if you're lucky, you add a little cheese. That's celebration food. That's party for one material. You eat it slowly, savoring every crumb, pretending you're at a feast in Olympus, until someone coughs nearby and asks if you're going to share. You don't. Feasts in myths are always grand, full tables, roasted beasts, laughter echoing through marble halls. You feast differently. You scrape the last of the grease from a pan and call it a delicacy. You find one soft spot in the bread and declare it a miracle. You boil bones until the broth is so cloudy it looks luxurious. Even fasting has its role. Not always by choice. Some days, there just isn't enough. You drink hot water with salt and try to fool your stomach. You go to bed early. You chew slowly. The monks call it penance. You call it Thursday. And yet, even in this bleak midwinter menu, there's a strange kind of satisfaction. You made this. You gathered, chopped, preserved, dried, soaked, cooked. Your hands turned raw ingredients into survival. It may not taste like glory, but it tastes like effort. Like grit, like home. You've memorized the sound of boiling cabbage. You know how to tell when a root is still edible by smell alone. You can peel a turnip in the dark with a blunt knife and still get most of the skin. Achilles wouldn't last a day. Sometimes, in the quiet, you imagine inviting the Greek gods to dinner. Dionysus shows up drunk. Hera demands something sweet. Apollo turns his nose up at the soup. And you ladle out hot broth, set down bread so heavy it dents the table, and say, eat or leave. And weirdly, they do. Even gods get cold, because when the wind howls outside and your breath fogs the air even indoors, food becomes more than food. It becomes warmth. It becomes defiance. It becomes proof that you're still here. Tonight's meal might not be much. Maybe it's just roasted parsnips and weak tea. But you hold it in both hands like a treasure. The warmth spreads through your palms. Your body thanks you. Your stomach stops complaining for a moment. And as you eat, you think not of Olympus, but of tomorrow, and the possibility of a better meal, maybe even one with flavor. You scrape your bowl clean. You lick the spoon. You wrap the bread and whisper to it like it's alive. And when you finally lie down, you don't dream of ambrosia. You dream of soup, with salt. The gods, you've noticed, never seem to get sick. They lounge in golden halls, basking in ambrosia and sunshine, without so much as a sniffle. No runny noses. No hacking coughs. No mysterious rashes or alarming wheezing sounds in the night. But you wake up every morning with a throat like gravel, a nose that might as well be a leaking faucet, and lungs that rattle like a bag of coins at tax time. Getting sick in winter isn't a question. It's a certainty. The real mystery is how bad it's going to get. A little chill and a few sneezes? Manageable. A full-blown fever? Dangerous. Something in your chest that makes it hard to breathe? That's when you start whispering prayers to every saint, goddess, and half-remembered house spirit that might be listening. You'd light a candle to Asclepius, the Greek god of healing, if you thought it would help. But somehow, you doubt he makes house calls to freezing, soot-stained cottages where the closest thing to a medical tool is a spoon with the handle snapped off. Still, you mumble something under your breath when your uncle starts coughing again. That low, bone-deep cough that's been haunting your nights. No doctors out here, just wise women, with herb bundles, a few memorized charms, and hands that know how to feel the forehead and say, not good. And if the sickness gets really bad, well, then it's up to you, and whatever scraps of old medicine someone remembered from 3 winters ago. You brew teas from dried nettle. You boil garlic in milk. You crush mustard seeds and smear them on cloth for poultices. Does it work? Sometimes. Or maybe the body just gives up and gets better out of spite. Historians still argue whether these remedies were genuinely effective or just desperate hope with a dash of folklore. But when it's between onion tea and nothing, you drink the onion tea. Meanwhile, in the myths, a single touch from a god can heal. Apollo cured plagues. Chiron taught medicine. Gods breathed life back into heroes just because they liked the drama. You breathe over a hot bowl of broth like it's a sacred ritual, hoping the steam unclogs your face before you pass out. The worst part isn't even the sickness, it's the cold that follows it around like an uninvited guest. Fever makes you sweat, then the room's chill turns that sweat into ice. You layer up, you peel down, you sweat, freeze, cough, and do it again, all while pretending you're fine, because the chores still need doing. The pigs don't care that you've got the plague light. Fringe beliefs suggest that spirits cause illness, especially in winter. The cold makes you vulnerable, they say. You've heard stories of people leaving bread outside for wandering ghosts or tying ribbons around their bedposts to ward off invisible thieves of breath. You've done both, just in case. At this point, you'd wear a wreath of garlic and mud if it meant fewer chills. When you're not sick, you're taking care of someone who is. You know the sounds, the shallow breathing, the sudden silence that makes you lean over, heart pounding, to check. You hold hands, pass cloths, say soothing nonsense like, "You're doing fine," when you're not sure that's true. There's a moment each night, just before sleep, when you scan the room. Counting the rasps, the sighs, the shuffles. It's a bedtime ritual, no gods, no hymns, just a quiet confirmation that everyone is still breathing. For now, in Olympus, no one dies of consumption. No one loses a child to a cold that lingered too long. They duel, they drown, they fall heroically, but they do not wither in the corner, wrapped in damp blankets and too tired to speak. You've seen it, you've felt the room grow quiet in that eerie, too clean way. And you've sat there, holding a bowl of useless herbs, wondering if maybe the gods just aren't listening anymore. But you carry on, because you must. You chop more wood, you stir the pot, you crush more garlic, you whisper encouragement even when your own voice is cracking. You become healer, priest, and pharmacist, all with cracked hands and one usable rag. And sometimes, people do get better. The fever breaks, the cough fades, the color returns, and that moment, the moment someone sits up and asks for food, is better than any divine blessing. It feels like victory, like proof that you know something the gods don't. Because healing, for you, isn't magic. It's patience. It's effort. It's showing up again and again with warm cloths and better lies. So tonight, when you lie down and hear someone in the corner cough, you don't flinch. You get up. You shuffle to the hearth. You pour water. You stir in honey. You press the warm cup into their shaking hands and say, "Drink." You aren't a god, you aren't immortal, but tonight, in this cold little room, you're the only healer they've got. Greek heroes slay monsters. You slay ice. Not mythical, fire-breathing hydras. Just the crusty buildup around the water bucket that sealed the lid shut again. Achilles had his spear. You've got a blunt knife and some choice words muttered under your breath while chipping away at breakfast. Getting water in winter is less about quenching thirst and more about proving you're still willing to suffer. Every drop is a triumph. You've already broken your favorite pot once this week, slipping on the frost-slick path to the stream. It cracked like a tragedy. Not Homeric, just tragic in the way that now you're thirsty, cold, and holding two useless clay halves like they betrayed you personally. And unlike Poseidon, who could summon oceans at will, you have to walk half a mile to the nearest water source with a rickety yoke and two buckets that slosh every time you breathe. You dream of indoor plumbing like it's Elysium. Warm water, flowing taps, luxury beyond the gods' wildest imaginations. Still, it has to be done. Someone has to keep the bucket full, because no water means no tea, no soup, no washing, no anything. That someone is usually you. Because your cousin claims he pulled something in his back and your sister mysteriously disappears every time the word fetch is mentioned. Historians still argue whether wintertime water was mostly drawn from wells, springs, or collected as snow melted inside. You use whatever's closer and slightly less frozen. You've tried melting snow, it works, but somehow, it tastes like smoke and goat fur, no matter how clean it looked going in. Of course, the water doesn't stay liquid for long. You heat it over the fire, carefully, slowly, humming so you don't fall asleep while waiting. There's something oddly sacred about watching ice turn to steam, like witnessing a miracle that requires no gods, just patience and the occasional poking stick. The Greek myths speak of sacred springs, water that heals, reveals prophecies, grants eternal life. You've got a chipped tin cup and the hope that today it doesn't freeze solid before your second sip. You once read that Hippocrene, the muse's fountain, inspired poetry. Your water inspires creative curses when you spill it on your socks. Every trip is a calculated risk. Will the path be iced over? Will the bucket handle snap again? Will your neighbor's dog growl at you for daring to exist on a public path? You've considered inventing a sled system, or bribing a goat to carry the bucket. So far, results have been mixed. You know all the winter water tricks. Place the bucket near the hearth but not too near. Wrap it in old cloth to slow the freeze. Keep a stick in it to break surface ice easier. And when it finally does freeze, you learn to ration what's still warm, because firewood is as precious as soup. You think about Artemis sometimes, running through snow-covered forests in her short tunic, bow in hand, not even flinching. Meanwhile, you're layering skirts, stuffing straw into your boots, and still losing feeling in your toes. Gods don't worry about frostbite. You do. Every hour, there's a fringe tale passed around older villagers about whispering to your water. It listens, they say. Treat it kindly and it'll keep your fire burning longer. You tried once. Whispered a kind word to the bucket. Your sister walked in, looked at you like you'd grown a third eye, and said, "Talking to water again, are we?" You stopped, but only when someone's watching. Water, in winter, becomes currency. You save every drop from washing. You pour leftovers into the stew. You scrape melted ice from the corners of the shed roof if it's sunny enough. You've even collected the condensation from inside your window once. That was a low point. And it's not just about thirst. Hot water is comfort. Steam against your face when you're sick. A heated cloth on a sore muscle. A pot bubbling quietly in the hearth, promising warmth. The gods had nectar and ambrosia. You have broth and tea. And somehow, you think yours means more. You've learned that survival isn't about grand gestures. It's about fetching water for the 5th time today because someone, accidentally, used the last of it washing a turnip. It's about boiling that water so carefully it doesn't crack your only pot. It's about remembering to cover the bucket so the cat doesn't fall in again. She did once. Never forgave you. Tonight, before bed, you check the water again. It's already icing over. You crack the top gently, listening to the delicate sound of thin ice breaking like glass. You ladle out just enough to drink, then tuck the bucket into its corner beside the fire. A few more hours of liquid life. You sip slowly. The water's warm, and it tastes faintly of smoke, ash, and maybe victory. The myths may talk about the great rivers of the underworld or fountains that grant immortality, but tonight, this is all you need. One sip, one moment of peace, one hot cup against the cold. In Olympus, everything glows. Sunlight dances on polished marble. Fire flickers in golden braziers. Even the gods themselves shimmer. You, on the other hand, are squinting at a flickering lump of tallow stuck into an old beetroot. This is your light source, a sad little stub sputtering with smoke and effort, illuminating exactly half of your soup bowl and none of your dignity. The darkness in winter is not poetic. It is total. When the sun sets, and it always seems to set too early, you enter a realm so black it feels alive. The gods, with their radiant auras and torch-bearing servants, never had to fumble around looking for a dropped spoon with frozen fingers. You do, every night, sometimes twice, because the spoon ends up under the dog. Light is precious, expensive, fleeting. You save candles for emergencies or special occasions, like midwife visits, or when someone thinks they saw a rat in the bread bin. Most nights, it's the fire, or what's left of it, glowing faintly beneath ash, pulsing like a heart trying not to give up. You feed it carefully, one twig at a time, like bribing it to live just a little longer. Historians still argue whether medieval homes had more than one fire source or if families crowded around a central hearth. Yours has one hearth, barely larger than a loaf of bread, and everyone fights for the warmest corner. The fire isn't just for cooking or heating. It's the center of everything. Storytelling, mending, arguing, apologizing, sleeping, hoping, and when it's gone, when the last coal dies and the room plunges into darkness, you feel it in your chest. Not fear, exactly, just an ancient, crawling awareness that you are very small in a very cold world. You've tried making rushlights, dried plant stems dipped in animal fat. They work, technically, but they smoke like jealous ghosts and stink like you're burning a shoe. One fell over last week and scorched your only pair of mittens. Now you keep them in a bowl of pebbles for balance. Nothing feels more fragile than light built out of leftovers. Greek myths adore symbolism. Light equals truth, divinity, revelation. For you, light equals not stepping in goat droppings in the middle of the night. You're not looking for spiritual clarity. You're looking for the outhouse without falling into a snowbank. Still, there's something comforting about the flicker of a flame. It dances on the walls and makes shadows move like old friends. You stare at it until your eyes sting. You let it lull you into forgetting the wind outside, the ache in your back, the tension in your shoulders. You tell stories by that fire. Maybe half-true ones. Maybe old ones passed down, reshaped, exaggerated. The ones where your grandfather killed a wolf with a spade. Or where someone's cousin's cousin saw a fey creature and lived to warn the sheep. Fringe folklore says fire can remember. That the hearth stores your words, your laughter, your secrets. You don't believe it, but you don't not believe it, either. So when you whisper something into the flames, just a little wish, a little thanks, you do it softly, like you mean it. The gods don't need fire. Prometheus stole it, yes, but he didn't use it to boil onions or warm feet. You do. Every ember matters. You've lit twigs with your breath. You've coaxed damp logs into reluctant flames. You've begged smoke to rise the right way, out the hole in the roof and not into your lungs. And when the fire is really alive, when it crackles and glows and sends little sparks dancing into the gloom, you almost feel powerful. Not divine, but close. As if you've done something extraordinary. Which, frankly, you have. Fire in winter is a miracle made by hand. Still, it never lasts. It dies down, as all things do. And that's when you huddle near what's left, letting your eyes adjust, your shoulders settle, your breath grows slow. You know every creak of the house now. You know the sound of wind beneath the door and the eerie quiet that means a snowdrift has sealed it shut again. Sometimes you lie awake, watching the fire dim to nothing. You imagine yourself in a temple, just for a moment. Marble columns, sacred flames, soft music. Then the chicken rolls over and pecks your leg in its sleep, and the spell breaks. You sigh, you pull your blanket tighter. And you stare at the coals until they're no longer coals, just faint red ghosts in the dark. But even then, especially then, you feel something odd. Not fear, not really, but a kind of resilience. You know the fire will be lit again tomorrow. You know you'll gather twigs, coax sparks, feed it back to life. That's your power, not borrowed from gods, not written in legend. Just earned, one night at a time. And that's enough. The Greeks feared the underworld, a shadowy realm ruled by Hades, full of wailing souls and rivers of forgetfulness. But you've seen something colder, quieter, and somehow worse. The outhouse at 3 in the morning, in February, with freezing rain slicing sideways through the moonlight. Hades might have Cerberus guarding the gates, but your version has cracked wooden walls, a seat that could blister flesh, and a family of very judgmental spiders. You'd take the underworld. At least it's warmer. The need always strikes when you're at your coziest. Wrapped in your one dry blanket, feet finally warm, brain just slipping into that sweet place between thought and sleep. And then, disaster. A familiar rumble. The inescapable realization. You have to get up. You delay, bargain, deny, but eventually, with an epic sigh, you grope around for your shoes, which are never where you left them, drape a shawl over your head like a mournful ghost, and begin the icy pilgrimage to what might generously be called a facility. There's no myth for this. No song sung by bards about the brave soul who faced the frozen privy and lived. But you know that struggle. The crunch of snow underfoot. The sharpened hail as wind hits skin. The sound of the door creaking open like it's trying to warn you. Historians still argue whether medieval peasants used chamber pots regularly or relied more often on outdoor latrines, especially in winter. You use both. You prefer the pot, despite its sloshy indignity. But when it's already full, or worse, frozen solid, it's time to face the outside world. Inside the outhouse, you don't sit. You hover. You wince. You breathe through your mouth and hum softly to keep your soul from escaping. You try not to imagine what might be lurking beneath the seat, or how deep that hole actually goes. The gods never had to deal with this. Even mortals in myths got better setups. Odysseus spent 10 years on the sea and still probably had more comfortable options than you. No one in the Iliad ever paused mid-battle to say, "Hold on, lads, I've got to run behind the olive tree." Fringe practices include using hot stones to warm the seat, or scattering herbs to keep away both pests and spirits. You tried pine needles once. They made things worse. Much, much worse. But this little outhouse, cursed as it is, matters. It's part of the rhythm of your life. Like fetching water, stoking fires, and praying that you don't fall in. You've had conversations in here, brief, urgent ones. You've solved problems here, mulled over arguments, sung to yourself when the wind was too loud. It's a throne of sorts, if you squint hard enough and abandon all standards. Of course, not every house even has one. Some families share a communal pit. Others use buckets and hope no one knocks them over. Some dig fresh snow holes and whisper to the night, "Let this be quick." And if you think that sounds bleak, it is. But it's also normal, mundane, just part of surviving winter. You remember one night, last winter, maybe 2 years ago now, when the snow was so deep the door wouldn't open. You had to climb out the window with a torch in one hand and the chamber pot in the other. It was the closest you've come to an epic quest. The neighbors applauded when you returned. You curtsied, then immediately went back to bed and didn't speak of it again. There's something humbling about these moments. The reminder that, for all your layers and rituals, you're still just a body trying to stay warm and comfortable in a world that really doesn't care. And yet, you find humor in it. You have to. Someone slipping on the path becomes a story told over soup. A frozen seat becomes a running joke. Even the spiders become characters in your quiet mental dramas. That one in the top corner? You've named him Gregor. He seems wise. The Greeks talked about hubris, the danger of pride. But winter humbles everyone. It reduces kings and commoners to the same shivering squat. It doesn't care how divine your lineage is. It cares whether you remembered to bring a lantern and not step in last night's mistake. Tonight, as you tiptoe back inside, breath steaming in the air, you try not to wake anyone. Your toes are numb, your nose aches, and your dignity is somewhere back behind the outhouse, probably curled up beside Gregor. But you did it. You made it back. And you'll do it again tomorrow. Because that's winter. It doesn't stop, so neither do you. And maybe, just maybe, that quiet, ridiculous, freezing little routine makes you stronger than any god. The myths tell of eternal glory. Of warriors whose names echo through centuries. Of gods who never age, never falter, never sleep. But you snore, loudly, wrapped in 3 cloaks and half a hay bale, tangled in someone else's foot, hoping that tonight you dream of anything besides leaking roofs and cabbages. Sleep, in winter, is a slippery thing. It comes slow, like a lazy cat, or fast and harsh, like a collapse. And it never comes alone. Cold slips in beside you like a second guest. It pulls at your toes, kisses your nose, nestles against the small of your back where the blanket always fails. The bed, if you're lucky enough to call it that, is a shared affair. Body heat is currency. Privacy is a legend. There are 6 of you in here tonight, maybe 7 if the dog's feeling sociable. You're packed like scrolls in a mythic library, tight, dryish, and prone to smudging. A straw mattress, 2 patched quilts, and a rotation system that only mostly works. If you're on the outside, you freeze. If you're in the middle, you cook. Either way, you wake up sore and vaguely offended. Historians still argue whether medieval folk truly went to bed, in the modern sense, or simply drifted in and out of sleep, resting in phases as firelight faded. You know the answer. Yes. All of the above. You sleep when the chores stop, when the cold slows your thoughts, when the room finally quiets down. But there's no guarantee it'll stay quiet. Someone always snores. Someone always talks in their sleep. Someone's toes are always just too cold and insist on finding your knees. And someone, bless them, farts like it's a form of punctuation. You've learned to sleep through anything. Or at least pretend convincingly. You remember stories of Endymion, the handsome shepherd granted eternal slumber by the moon goddess Selene. 30,000 years of peaceful sleep, untouched by age or time. What luxury! You get roughly 3.5 hours before your cousin rolls over and elbows you in the throat. Still, there are tricks. You sleep with a hot stone wrapped in cloth, tucked near your stomach. You stuff straw around your shoulders to trap heat. You hum softly to yourself, songs your mother sang, or tunes that showed up in your head when you were too tired to remember words. And dreams? Oh, they come. Weird ones. Intense ones. Probably fever-induced. Sometimes you're chasing geese across a frozen pond in a toga. Sometimes you're standing in line to wash dishes in Olympus, except all the cups are full of soup and Zeus keeps changing the rules. Occasionally, you dream of summer, but it feels too far away to trust. Fringe folklore says that dreams in winter travel faster. That when the nights are long and the earth is quiet, your soul wanders farther. You've never wandered far, just enough to wake up with a start and wonder whose elbow is in your ear. Even the gods had their dream deities. Morpheus, they called him, god of dreams and illusions. He brought visions to heroes, messages from beyond. You wonder what he'd make of your dreams, scrambled bits of chores and animals and that one embarrassing moment from 3 years ago that won't leave you alone. But despite the discomforts, despite the noise, the cold, the shared blanket that never reaches your feet, there's a strange comfort here. You are not alone. You are tangled in a heap of humanity. You are breathing the same air, sharing the same warmth, surviving the same season. Together, you've memorized the sounds of your family sleeping. The little coughs, the sleep murmurs, the way someone's breath catches when the wind howls. It's a lullaby, a strange, imperfect, lovely lullaby. Sometimes before sleep claims you fully, you whisper little things into the dark. Secrets, wishes, regrets. The others can't hear, and even if they could, they wouldn't remember. Night is forgiving like that. You lie there, eyes open, watching shadows shift across the beams. The candle's gone out, the fire is just a breath, but someone's arm brushes yours. Someone else shifts closer, the dog sighs, and that's enough warmth to drift again. Sleep is not a battle you win. It's a truce you make. A quiet agreement between body and world. Let me rest, and I'll keep going tomorrow. Tonight, the truce holds. And as you finally fall under, nestled between snoring, sighing souls and the last flicker of shared breath, you don't need divine dreams or moonlit promises. You just need this: closeness, softness, stillness. You sleep, not like a hero, but like someone who made it through another day. You wake up before the sun, because the cold makes a better alarm than any rooster. Your nose tells you it's below freezing again. Your toes confirm it. Everything aches, shoulders from huddling, neck from the straw mattress shifting, soul from the sheer indignity of having to move at all. There's no golden dawn here. No rosy-fingered goddess stretching light across a glorious battlefield. Just a pale smear of gray that leaks slowly into the cracks of the room like someone forgot to turn the sky on properly. In the myths, sunrise means renewal. A new day, a new quest. In your world, sunrise means chores. Someone has to stir the ashes, relight the fire, and fetch water before the rest wake up and start asking why there's no tea yet. That someone is usually you. And no one remembers to thank you. Still, you stretch, creak to your feet, and begin. You know every board in this floor by sound. You step over the dog, avoid the bucket, feel around for your shoes, and shuffle toward the hearth. The coals are weak, but alive. Like you, historians still argue whether peasants began their days with food or work, but you know the truth. There's no difference. The work is to make the food is to fuel the work. You move like a machine, mind half asleep, hands doing what they always do. Stirring, patching, prepping. The fire catches. Barely. Success. You warm your fingers over the flame and pretend you're a priest performing some sacred rite. In a way, you are. Fire means life. Heat. Boiling water. Softening stale bread. Driving off the shadows that stretch across the floor like forgotten debts. The others stir slowly. Your sister sneezes. Your cousin grunts. The baby starts fussing. Soon the room will be noise and elbows and complaints. But for now, you get a few sacred minutes. Just you and the fire and the steam rising from the first pot of the day. You think of Hestia, the goddess of the hearth. In Greek lore, she was the quiet one. The still point. Every home kept a flame burning for her, even as heroes ran off to fight monsters or seduce clouds. You like her. She never needed glory. She just kept the world running. You don't get parades or poetry, either. You get soot on your face and your name called 12 times before breakfast. But like Hestia, you keep the flame going. You keep the family upright. You patch the hole in the roof. You stir the pot when no one else wants to. There's fringe wisdom in your village that morning breath carries luck. first words spoken before sunrise can shape the day. You test this by muttering, "Don't burn, don't burn, don't burn," to the pot of porridge. It doesn't work, but you keep doing it anyway. Outside, frost patterns lace the windows like secret runes. Your breath clouds the air even inside. Someone's boots are frozen. Someone else is complaining about their sleepstone, a lump under the mattress no one bothered to remove. You sigh, smile a little, and ladle out bowls. No one says thank you. They're too busy blowing on spoons, scraping bowls clean, arguing over the last crust. But you see it in their shoulders, the way they relax when something warm hits their stomachs. That's enough. The day stretches ahead. Ice to break, animals to feed, snow to sweep from the roof before it collapses again. Your cousin claims his back still hurts. Your sister disappears the moment you mention firewood. Some things never change, and yet, there's something different this morning. Not in the weather, it's still bleak, but in the way you move. You've survived another night. You've stoked the fire, fed the hungry, stood against the dark. And now, in this half-lit hour before the work begins in earnest, you realize something. You're not just surviving. You're holding the line. Against the cold, against hunger, against despair. You don't need a golden chariot to carry you across the sky. You have your boots, your breath, your battered pot. You are, quietly and without fanfare, heroic in the way the world never sings about. So you eat your porridge. Slowly, gratefully, you let the warmth settle in your chest like an ember. And you rise, again, into the cold, ready to do it all. Because winter hasn't won yet. You step outside into the white. The whole world has turned silent under snow, as if someone pulled a thick wool blanket over the landscape and whispered, "Shush." No birds, no wind, just the soft crunch of your boots as you walk toward the shed, the fields, the life that must be tended even when the world seems asleep. Greek heroes woke to trumpet blasts and battle cries. You wake to frozen troughs and sleepy goats blinking at you like you've interrupted their existential crisis. But still, you rise. Still, you feed. Because they depend on you, and you're too stubborn to let anything freeze to death on your watch. Not even the chicken with the crooked foot who hates you for no reason. Your hands move without needing to think. Break the ice on the bucket. Scatter the grain. Check the co-op. Listen to the quiet. The real kind. The kind that wraps around your ribs like a scarf. No one shouting, no one asking, just breath, cold and real. Historians still argue whether animals were kept indoors with people all winter long or only during the coldest nights. You don't argue, you just know that sometimes you wake up nose to nose with a goat and don't even flinch. That's life. Shared heat, shared breath, shared smells you try very hard to ignore. The snow glitters, unreal and too bright. You shield your eyes. The air tastes like metal, but you breathe it in deeply. For once, the ache in your bones feels good, like proof you're still moving, still alive. In the myths, winter is something to be endured through divine drama. Persephone's descent, Demeter's grief, storms sent by angry gods. Your version is less poetic, more personal. A loose shutter that keeps banging. A sore shoulder from chopping wood. Soup that burned a little but still got eaten. And still, you've made it. To this morning. This snow. This breath that puffs into the air and disappears before it can be questioned. There's a strange kind of beauty here. Not the dramatic kind. Not the marble columns and glowing halos kind. The quiet beauty of steam rising from a bucket. The crunch of hay underfoot. The way your little sister laughs when she sees the icicles hanging off the henhouse like a wizard's beard. You laugh too, because what else is there? Laughter, even soft and tired, is a rebellion against the cold. A spark, a reminder that, no, winter doesn't get to win. Not yet. Fringe traditions whisper about the last snow of the season. How if you catch a flake on your tongue and make a wish, it might stick. So you do. Just for fun. The flake melts instantly, and the wish is small. Just enough food next week. Just one day without anyone getting sick. Just 1 hour of sun. Nothing divine. Nothing grand. But it's enough. You walk back inside, the house still half asleep. The fire has gone low again. You kneel, feed it with a handful of twigs. and wait for the flame to remember its purpose. It catches. It grows. Outside, the wind picks up again. Snow swirls in little ghosts past the window. Inside, the baby laughs. Someone sneezes. Someone groans. You sit by the hearth. Pull your blanket tighter. And finally let your eyes close. Because for the first time in weeks, maybe months, you don't feel like you're losing. You feel like you're winning. Quietly, gently, one chore at a time. One night at a time. And as the warmth spreads up your arms and into your chest, as the fire dances just enough to remind you that tomorrow still exists, you lean back. And you rest. So now, the snow still falls outside your window, but softer. The world slows, folding itself into the hush of night. You've done enough. Fetched enough water, chopped enough wood, boiled enough cabbage to last a lifetime. The fire is low, just a faint glow now. You can hear it, not crackling, but purring. A contented sound, like the house itself has settled down to sleep. Your breath is steady, the aches are quieter, even the dog has stopped snoring. Small miracles. You've wandered through gods and myths and mud-slicked shores. You've made it past turnip dinners and freezing privies and those endless, sleepless nights wrapped in scratchy blankets and whispered hope. You've faced the long dark, and you're still here. Maybe you're not a hero sung by poets, but you've done something harder. You've endured. You've stayed soft in the cold, generous when there wasn't enough, warm when the world wasn't. That matters. That always matters. And now, it's time to drift. Let your muscles melt. Let your thoughts go quiet. No more lists. No more chores. Just the breath of sleep, the softness of straw, the rhythm of a heart that says, I am still here. The gods may keep their temples. You have this moment, this fire, this breath. So close your eyes now. Let the cold stay outside. You're safe. You're warm. You're home.